sheesh. Anyways, bear with me. It's the middle of May now. The last video I made was probably a month and a half ago. They give you all sorts of advice. It's supposed to be pretty regular, every week, 2 weeks, something. Just too much was happening. Allergies hit me pretty hard this year for the main part of it. But other than that, there's maintenance around the house. Somebody's got to mow the lawn. Landscaping, just freshening up, spring cleaning. Anyway, all that resulted in this taking so long to get back into the shed here. Thanks for coming back. And if you're a new viewer, think about subscribing. Give me a thumbs up. Let's continue. Welcome back to Made by J&D. I was going to take the pedals out of here because I'm going to work on the steering and also on the radiator back there. But I was thinking of taking these pedals off, and I go, well, it works so well, just unbolting this plate. I'll just unbolt all of this. Not the best weather conditions. The wind is blowing, as it does most of the time. And parts of the trim are perfectly aligned on this building that makes that lovely song in the background. Hope you don't mind. As far as the radiator goes, I really wanted to keep this space, for no real good reason other than it's already there, and that's how the seat was designed. But the alternative was to put the radiator behind the motor. And while that's doable, I think either way, radiator getting cooling air is going to be compromised, because in the front here, it can't blow in very easily. But I know that they have made vehicles that do that, and I can make ducting maybe. Plus, it's very easy to do it that way. In the back, I'd have to create some kind of mounts. I'd have to figure out some kind of ventilation. I certainly couldn't have the fan driving cooling air over it. But in this case, it's very easy to mount the radiator in the front. I have to change the spacing a bit, but not that much. And then I can maintain the original fan, the clutch that's on it. I just got to work out how much distance to leave myself room to replace the water pump, plus everything else in there that won't be very tight. I've made a mark on the frame here. You can't see it in the camera, but that's the back of the radiator, and that gave me about, I'm just really eyeballing it here, it's about 6 inches from the back of the radiator to the front of the fan clutch. It gives me a lot of room to play with. The front of the radiator is about 4 inches. So, the more gap I have between the back of this and the front of the radiator is better breathing. I can move that back quite a bit. So I leave myself 2 inches. I gain myself 4 inches. So I can move this back 4 inches, the radiator. The radiator itself is 40 inches wide. The distance between these frame rails, 43 inches. So it gives me 1.5 inches on each side. Clear of the radiator. The radiator can be lowered down. It'll be down below this, and that's fine because it's still above the axle. The radiator will be, I can probably hit it. If I drive over something, I can hit it. I'll have to come up with some kind of guard. But if I can bring the radiator down below the top of this, that's great. And it just has to be just below. I can get to the radiator cap, lift up a lid or something. Now this housing is 42 inches. I might be able to make this wider. What I'm thinking is if I cut this off from the floor all the way around, I should just be able to shift this housing over and sit right back down on top of the frame and still allow room for the radiator. So I guess my next thing is to really mount the radiator in here. Well, cut this out, cut out the floor, and adjust my plans to suit. These doors are in the way, so they got to come off. A lot of questions have to be answered yet. remeasured the radiator. It's 40 inches to the outside of the bracket that supports it, the brackets that are bolted to the surround around that radiator. The radiator itself is only just over 36 inches. Still, the bracketry is what I've got to adjust for, so yeah, 40 inches. That actually works out to the brackets I've got to put inside on the frame. That'll have to be 37 inches. That'll be between and give me enough room to drill holes and all that to mount it in there. That vibrating noise. Before I mount the radiator, I might have to offset it. And the reason is, here's the original steering column. And I've used this level to find out about where that would be. So it's about 1 inch in from the inside of the frame rail. Steering column goes down. It's got a kind of a U-joint thing. It allows quite a bit of, it can turn a corner nearly, because that's the way it was in the motorhome. It's the motorhome steering column. Okay, so I can mount that on the inside, but the problem is the radiator is going to be about here. I've only got 3 inches of clearance between the inside of the frame rail and the radiator. The drag link, or the bail, is right there. And I think it's called the drag link that goes between the bail and the steering sector up here. Right, so that is already probably 8 inches inside the frame rail. I'll probably end up having to have a drag link that goes between that bail and the steering sector that turns a corner. And that's in order to miss the radiator. I couldn't move the radiator far enough over that way to miss it. So here's everything to do with the steering. Steering column, it gives me a tilt wheel function. Automatic transmission. I don't think it extends in and out. You can see the original bracket to mount it underneath the dash of the motorhome. On the bottom of it went to this U-joint gizmo, and it can turn pretty sharply because in the motorhome this was actually facing forward. This is the original fire truck steering wheel mount, and that was pretty much straight down. Maybe a little bit leaning inward. You know, the hole was about here. I can't do that with this one because it's different. So from this face, the steering wheel on the truck was about 10.5 inches. So it was quite a bit up here. I'm just going to mock this up a little bit, use some wire. Ow. Okay, that can go down a bit. That'll work. The steering column is going to have to be more like this. Wow. That's as far down as it goes. I'm probably, to get this vertical enough, I don't know if you can see that up in here, but I'll have to cut a part of the footwell. Is going to have to be relieved a little bit. Wow, even then, can I make it work? Because that U-joint's got to go off the end of it over here. The steering column might be too long. Dang. It's got this adjustable feature, which is kind of nice. It can flip up, flip down, but that's as far as it flips down. So I have to keep that column at a less of an angle. And that's fine because it was placed at about like this, in that the frame, even though the frame was going this way, it had a bit of an upset, so this was at an angle. And that was to make this at right angles to the bell crank that was at the end over here. I don't need that anymore. This can be pretty much directly in front of that bell crank. Now this is the link that went between the two. Let's see, this went like this, and the steering column went in here. And it actually kind of went like this. It turned almost a 90-degree angle. I'm going to have to get a puller for this, but what I've done in the meantime, since that's a trip into town, I've made some little silver marks. Can you see that where that lines up? That there is one extreme, and there is the other extreme, stop to stop. That is not quite 45 degrees. And for this to work for me, I'm going to have pretty much, this is going to have to be moved over a degree or two, because I need this to be straight down in the middle. I need it to be about down about there. And at the moment, it won't do that. Man, that is not going to come off of there. Hey, just needed a little persuasion. What? See you later. Pretty obvious why that didn't want to come off. That's tapered. In fact, I doubt this arm will even go on that way. That's the way the arm goes on, and it won't go on this way. Okay. I don't know if you can see inside of this, but this lever can only be put on in 90-degree increments. There's those internal serrations. Every 90 degrees, there's one that's kind of like a keyway. So that means I can't just put this anywhere. It needs to go in a certain position. That's how it bolts on there. These holes aren't square or plumb or nothing. Nothing. Jeez, weird. Anyways, I'll cut this off here, and there's a brace in the back, and then I'll hold it up underneath that front of that frame extension and see what it needs to do under there to make that match up. I'm just doing some mindless disassembly work while I use another part of my brain to try to figure out how to fix the steering, set it up. And these steps have to come off anyway, so I'm looking at that and I'm doing this. This takes almost no brain power, but I don't have much to spare, so I'm going to try to use the rest of it over there and see how I can set that steering up, because it's one of the more critical things of this whole build. Well, I think that looks a lot better. Yep, no step. So what's bothering me? How to mount that? Somewhere in here. I've drawn some lines. Don't know if you can see them very well. That's at about the angle I think the steering box has to be at. If I mount it on this plate over here, and marked it with an arrow, that way up. So that's going to be tilted back somewhat like that. To mount this, I'll weld this onto the frame behind. But how high up do I make it? Is the angle correct? Well, bear with me here. This has taken quite a few tries to get this right. Looking down, I've got the motorhome, or the frame anyways, for the vehicle. Goes to a set of A-arms. The arms go to the frame. Got a cross member. And then I have the bell, what I'm calling the bell crank, which is about here. It goes to the tie rod. It goes between the wheels. And that's a straight arm that goes out like this. From the motorhome, it had an arm coming out this way, which then tied to there was a thing like this that the steering box was tied to, about like this, and there was an arm coming off the side that was pointed straight down, as well as directly facing. When the wheels were straight forward, this was at a right angle. I'm changing that now. The steering box is now up here. Whoops. About up here. The arm, however, it's a big box. The arm comes down, it's actually crossing underneath the frame. And that's still got to be a right angle, but now the arm has to be changing to about here. So that this is 90 degrees to this box, which has been moved forward about 2.5 feet. From the side view, got the big wheel, got the frame. No, it's not quite like that. Not like this. Okay, now the steering box has to be at an angle, like this. The arm has to be pointing straight down. The bell crank is roughly in this position, somewhere down there. It's got to be a straight shot then to go to that arm. So it's crossing underneath the frame. It's got to go up a little bit. In addition to all that, the front of the truck is about here. Well, that arm's got to be above the bottom of that cab, or it'll be exposed, and you can hit stuff with it. I don't know, cause an issue. So that's going to be above the bottom of the cab, and that's all got to tie into the steering column, which is coming down at an angle like this, and that's got to turn a corner. That link somehow, I've got to have some kind of link that turns a corner down here. Now, right now it's a combination of a U-joint and an extension and a bunch of things. That steering column is going to be too long because otherwise it's too vertical. Sheesh. One last thing. This can't be a straight shot because I'm going to have a radiator about here. So, this just make it a little bit more complicated and have a radiator in there so that this arm has to go around it somehow. Oh, geez. Third time's the charm. This is as long as it ever was, but I've cut it back. At the same angle I've got this walk-up bracket at because it has to be cut anyway. There's plenty of room. Let's get the C-clamp in there. Gonna do 2 C-clamps. It's so heavy. One ain't gonna hold it. There's not a long enough here run to. Gives me some room to goof around. Okay, is that about where I want it to be? It's not too bad actually. Extreme of its swing. That actually will clear. We're good. Okay. But the arm definitely has to be moved. That's at one end. That's the other end. Okay. I thought there might be a problem clearing the bottom here, but no, none of that. Okay. Let's see how how it lines up with my bell crank. It's got to line up with the outside of that to the inside of that. And I think that's going to work. No, it isn't. No, it isn't. Ooh. Okay, I cut that at a 17-degree angle. It's got to be much steeper than that. It's got to be maybe 25-degree angle. Okay, well that's why we mock things up.